of this for this particular month, and really for the next couple of months, we want to talk about parishes that or multi pastors who are having to manage two or more parishes. Multi-parish pastoring is becoming more of a normal in our world, and it's different, and it requires some kind of a different approach sometimes as it relates to communications. And so as we consider a multi-parish communications strategy, we are finding that we're getting more calls about helping parishes through that. And so Liz actually works with a couple of parishes who's with us here. Father Tom Pistorius is her pastor and oversees two parishes. And then Molly Judd just finished working with a couple of parishes here in St. Louis who were kind of in a similar situation, and Father Tom had recommended that they speak with us. And so we're gonna this month hand it to Molly, and she's gonna share a little bit about that experience and some of her learnings through that. And then from there, we'll open it up for Q&A and conversation. So Molly, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. I feel really, honored to be here. And it was a really great exercise to think about what I did learn after being with Our Lady of Providence and Annunciation in St. Louis. And Father Estwine gave me permission to use them as an example. So you'll get to kind of see some real-time images and discoveries that we had along the way. I apologize. I'm going to kind of like turn a little bit with my notes as I talk, but let me pull up this PowerPoint. And let's see. Slideshow. Can everyone see this?
No, I don't see
yet.
your screen
Oh,
yet.
no, not yet.
Now, do you see it?
No.
Sorry about this.
Hi, Maria. We're just getting started with the PowerPoint deck, so they're pulling it up.
Let's see.
Good morning.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. Can you see that?
I could.
Oh no.
Now it says click to X. There it is.
There you go.
Yeah.
I wonder why it's not letting me do
You might not
slideshow.
want to go to the show deck. That's okay. We'll just look at it this way.
Okay, sorry about that. So I was thinking a lot about in this process with Annunciation and Our Lady of Providence. Sometimes we can be thinking about how we're different, but I think it's always good at the beginning to remember that we are all the same and that we are united under baptism. We're united under the Catholic Church, and though we all have different gifts of the Holy Spirit and kind of different parts of the world that parishes are supposed to, serve, that we all have like the same mission given to us by Jesus, baptize, teach, proclaim the gospel. Um, we have the sacraments, we have teaching, we have evangelization. These are the things that are the most universal to all of us and things that we can really hold on to at the beginning of a process of trying to understand how we can unite and yet hold on to the two separate identities of parishes. Like Katie said, many pastors are finding themselves in the position now where they are pastors of different places and different locations, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away, probably depending on how rural you are. But for this webinar, I'm kind of going to use a case study based on two parishes, Annunciation, Our Lady of Providence, in kind of a smaller, more close-knit community in St. Louis. And so when I first started the project with them, it was really fun because I got to sit with some handpicked people that Father chose. And this is kind of a tip that I'll have at the end, but he made his parish council people from both parishes. And so like they were kind of like the visionaries alongside Father when he would be trying to make decisions and find ways of supporting each parish. And through the conversation, I realized that they really saw themselves as sister parishes, which might be a little bit different than parishes that don't have quite the same demographic of people, that aren't as close. But that became kind of a beautiful starting point for us as we began the process. Um, so I kind of wanted to start with showing you the glory of it at the end. This is kind of these logos, I feel like, really show how close these parishes actually are and how much their spiritualities really mirror each other. At first it was, we want our own logo, but then we want one together. And so we kind of ended up landing on the image of a diptych, one that, they can face each other, and that, they have same colors, they have similar, spiritualities or feel to them, but they are different and distinct. Um, and so the success of this was really a strengthened sense of unity between Annunciation and Our Lady of Providence. It was already there, but I think they were able to hold on to the identity as true sister parishes by the end. Um, we had the gift of mapping out engagement and a communication strategy, especially towards young families. This area in St. Louis is kind of particular in that, there's mostly either people who are retiring there or younger families that are beginning. And so how do we not only, make this a place where the stalwarts of the parish are thriving, but that also young families feel welcomed, and that this is their sacramental home. And we, through that, are looking at a integrated marketing communications plan that kind of maps out a strategy of how we're going to have a unified website, how their social media presence is going to look, that we're going to have a consistent flock note messaging, that it's not just every parish doing their own thing, but kind of uniting them, as you can see in these logos, the ability to say two different things are happening at two different parishes, but we are a bigger Catholic community. And then hopefully kind of really defined roles and responsibilities when it comes to different people in the different parishes. Both parishes have secretaries, but they're going to share a person for discipleship and evangelization, and then someone for communications. So what falls under each person? And I feel like we had the opportunity to really clearly define these roles, which I think will be helpful in uniting them, and uniting the messaging. So this is a little bit of something fun. I have loved working with KPC because something that I stole from one of the other consultants is talking about parishes as having charisms. And charisms are a gift of the Holy Spirit for the well-being of the church. And it's kind of a fun exercise to think about how you can ask the Holy Spirit what he has given your parish. And as you can see, and I really wish this slideshow was working, but you can see that a lot of things that they describe their parish to be are very similar, welcoming, close community. Both of them talked about Father Mike and how great of a pastor he is, simplicity. And I think that this kind of led us to finding the charism and characteristics of both Our Lady of Providence and Annunciation. They're welcoming, they're generous, they're very stable. The people who are there who have been long-term parishioners are very generous, that make it feel like a home, and but Father has, casted this vision of wanting more discipleship. So I would say step one, what I learned in this case study, and for parishes that are trying to kind of embark on this new journey of unifying or keeping separate identities, really kind of taking the time to establish your steps forward. And with KPC, I realized, it's really important to be able to map out, not just like we always want to do it all at once. But to say, okay, this is going to take us 6 months, or this is going to take us a year, or this is going to take us a year, and then we're going to revisit every year and see, based on analytics, what worked, what didn't. Um, and so Father and I took 6 months, and hopefully we'll get to touch base, every once in a while. And they're in the process of hiring, which is really exciting. Um, but we first met with key parish leaders. So we had a couple small groups that went through a needs assessment of what's working in the parishes right now, what's not. Obviously, this is really new that you have two parishes under one pastor. What do you perceive your needs to be? And, at the end, we can see if they're actual needs or not. Um, and I am not a big meeting person. I sometimes, like I want meetings when I'm in them to be efficient and, have a goal at the end. And so I know meetings can be hard, but in this process, I think it's really important to have um, key meetings with key leaders in your parish. And that means not only the people that are hired, but that means people that, always volunteer, that have always been a lector. Like who are the leaders in your church that kind of create the culture, as well as that work in your offices, because they probably have a really good idea of what's happening at the parish in in a parishioner's shoes on a daily basis. um in this vision, though, we also want to establish, and affirm each parish's history and culture. Like I said, I was really grateful to be with parishes that had very similar ones, but their history was different. One had a religious community that was running their school. A different one, it was like there was more farmland back when it was founded. And now, even though they're in similar places, like there are these spiritual roots that are kind of born into parishes. So, how do we kind of acknowledge that as we're kind of casting a new vision for the future? And I'll say this later, but I think for Father and I, what we wanted to do in this process was, obviously, right now they are standalone parishes, but we don't know what's going to happen into the future. And so the hope that through this process, the vision was, if they stay two separate parishes, great. But if they merge at some point, that's also going to be great. And that we've laid the foundation of communion between these two parishes, um, that kind of would make an ease of transition in that way. And so I'm going to go back to this second slide, and you can see that we found the messaging of come and receive, go and proclaim as kind of the charism in the field that both parishes have, but are distinct to kind of the call of each patron. So Annunciation, come and receive; Our Lady of Providence, go and proclaim. And so crafting shared messaging is an opportunity that you have now when you're combining parishes that you always have, but in a new way, you're kind of starting from the beginning. So you can kind of make things simpler, in a lot of the work that KPC does. It's like we have these long bios and these long histories and things on our about us page that you don't even read on your own website, so having the ability to make it really simple, clear, and effective in this vision session is, uh, yeah, I just think really, really helpful. So that was step one, establishing a clear vision. Is everyone still with me? Okay. Um, step two, build a unified communication strategy. So sometimes, when Father and I would meet, we would kind of come back to this same problem or this same kind of fear, you know, in dual parish leadership. How do we keep communication clear and consistent between both parishes? For when he first inherited both parishes as the shepherd, it was, some had a flock note, some had an Instagram, some of their Instagrams were really thriving, and then the other parish didn't even have flock note yet. So like how do we create a strategy of communication that makes sense and that can unify instead of divide? So we had one calendar. We made one calendar for both parishes, similar themes, and then we've also created one flock note, one Instagram, uh, uh, one single website is kind of in the process that would include both parishes, but also keep them separate. So, coming back to the images, if you were to go on their website that we're working on, you would see this, but then there'd be two separate tabs to go to Annunciation and then to go to Our Lady of Providence, both with their own kind of, little mission statement and their history, um, but kind of uniting them under the same patronage of Father. Oop. And then establishing a process. So I love processes. I love workflows. I love knowing that if this happens, then these are the next steps I take. And it can be, a trial and error at the beginning of establishing a process. But we know that in the church there can be a lot of turnover in positions. Whether that's with a young communications director, or it's the secretary wants to retire, it can be, and then the workflow is all in their head, or it's been a way that they've done it forever, and they think everyone knows it. But to kind of establish a workflow of, okay, if this announcement comes out, who does it go to? Does it go to every parishioner? Does it go in the flock note? Is it announced at the pulpit? Is it Christmas time and we want to do a direct mailing? Um, kind of like ciphering out at the beginning there and then saying, okay, who's it coming from? Is it coming from the pastor? Is it coming from evangelization and discipleship? Um, And then who's actually writing it? It may be coming from the pastor, but it might be written by the communications director. So kind of creating processes and workflows that make sense and obviously can always be tweaked. I say this kind of a little bit later, but I think it's really important that, yearly we kind of look over the process and say, that's actually not how we do it. Let's rewrite it so that it makes more sense to what's the reality of our parish. So step 3, strengthening the community. I think one of the biggest fears, and we talked about it in our first couple sessions of doing this type of communication work, integrating work, is that we're going to lose engagement, that we're actually going to lose parishioners, or human emotions get in the way. People have been parts of parishes forever, for generations, and so there can be anger or hurt or confusion. Sometimes there's excitement, but for the most part, I think probably there's always a little bit of a reservedness that comes into kind of re-looking at a communication strategy, or kind of trying to become closer with a parish that's that's nearby. Um, but Father and I really wanted this to be an opportunity to increase participation in parish life, instead of, divide. Obviously, some of these things are obvious desires, but to say them out loud, I thought was really helpful. And so as we're thinking about strengthening the community, like, where does your parish naturally thrive? Providence, they would have these things called Providence Fest, and it was like this big get together. It was their parish carnival. And then Annunciation had this event called Windows and Wine, and they would have their parishioners go through the church and see the different windows, the stained glass, and Father would give a little um kind of like a little history behind it, like what you're seeing. And these events really became opportunities for Providence to come to Annunciation, and Annunciation to come to Providence. I like to kind of say it's like the low hanging fruit of invitation and discipleship. Um, how can we use the best of both? And an easy kind of invite events to kind of create a sense of evangelization. They're kind of low pressure social settings, and they kind of are ways to say, you know, I know we haven't seen you at mass in a long time, but all of your kids can run around. It'll be really fun. Um, and yet you're near the parish, you're near Father, you're near people who are of different generations. And through these experiences of community, Father and I talked about this can be the place of personal invitation. So that was a real desire of Father's that might have been a little bit different from the vision before. Discipleship has always been something that is critical to a life of faith. Um, but I would say with a renewed vigor, Father really is desiring there to be faith sharing groups and discipleship within Our Lady of Providence and Annunciation. And so using this vision and these communication strategies to strengthen community leads to a place of personal invitation. And I know this isn't technically a communications thought, but whenever I talk about discipleship or invitation, I like to quote this priest, Father Luigi Giussani, and he talks about how when Peter met Jesus, it corresponded to all the desires of his heart. And he goes on, I'm paraphrasing, but to say, like, remember how you were invited and remember how it made you feel. I think sometimes in evangelization right now, uh, invitation becomes almost a burden, or it becomes something that can be a little aggressive if we don't know how to do it. But to think about, like, when you actually met Jesus for the first time, how did it correspond to your heart? Where did that feeling of like, oh, finally, um, where did that land in you and why? And reflecting on that as we're trying to strengthen community and discipleship. So this isn't a step, but I just thought that I would throw it in here. Some parishes have schools and some have multiple schools. Our Lady of Providence and Annunciation was unique in the sense they were part of 6 or 7 parishes that all combined into one school. Now, the actual the actual grade level kind of showed you which location you'd be at. So maybe the 6th and 7th graders were at Annunciation, and then the 8th graders were at Our Lady of Providence, and then kindergarten was at a different parish. Um, so I'm not going to talk about schools too much, but we did find that this was kind of a real place of a place of desire to move more deeply in, because you would see kids, and even the parish council and some of the younger parents that were on it said, it's so funny. Um, my kids want to hang out with these other kids, but their parents don't go to our church. And you know, once they graduate from the school, I'll see them walking down the street and they've never gone to mass again. So schools can be an interesting place of communication, and sometimes communication directors are with the parish, and sometimes they're with the school. This was the school was a separate entity, but Father still had a lot of sway when it came to like language that communication would be having. Okay. And so step 4, and this goes back to the whole process thing. Who communicates for you? And how do you strengthen and empower your leadership team? One thing we know is that parish work can have a very high level of burnout. And and I think a lot of it is that we all are so passionate about mission, and we all want to see, um, the faith grow and thrive, and we want people to encounter the person that we've encountered, and what we've found in our life of faith. Um, and we're not a business, right? Like we aren't trying to, be CEOs, but we also can learn how to develop our leadership and how to develop our communication skills. Um, and I think that this is creating true job descriptions. Um, what does the secretary do and what does the communications director do? Um, maybe the secretary is in charge of the bulletin, but maybe that means we need to have a weekly cadence of meetings so that we can all be on the same page language wise. Does Annunciation handle this, or does Our Lady of Providence handle this? Does Father, or does the Director of Evangelization? And here's where we can kind of look at our current parish councils and our ministries, and find ways for them to collaborate with us, rather than compete. This is a great place of unity. Annunciation, you don't have to do it all alone. Our Lady of Providence, you don't have to do it all alone. Like, how do we create something um, that makes you feel comfortable to communicate with those in your small group, with those that you're meeting at Providence Fest? How do we create a language that's simple, clear, unified? Um, like come and receive, go and proclaim. Let's see. Thanks for letting me go back and forth. I know it's um a little choppy, but oh, that's already the one I did. So I'm just going to go back to this with kind of a final encouragement for pastors. Um, fathers, we are so grateful for you, and the Lord has asked a lot of priests, of parish communicators, um, and kind of this new uncharted territory when it comes to combining parishes, or being a shepherd over multiple parishes. So I know that I don't just speak for myself. I think I speak for KPC, that we really want you to know that you're not alone. That as we kind of went through all of that information and all those different steps, that like we really do desire to be a place of sounding boards, that we can really say, okay, this is working and this isn't working, or my school is really where we're having a hard time communicating, or yeah, I need to figure out how these job descriptions look, and what are the clear roles and responsibilities, because it's all on my plate right now, or it's all of my secretaries, and I want to alleviate some of that. um so we are just so grateful that you're here with us, and we are just grateful to be able to walk with you and just kind of maybe take a little bit of the burden off your shoulder, that we can kind of create a process that's easy and smooth for you and your parishes. So I would love some time for question and answer if you have it. I'm going to go back to the screen so I can see all your faces, but just so grateful that you listened to me for that long, and hopefully some of it was helpful, and yeah, just an honor to be in the mission field with you.
Molly, thanks so much for walking us through that case study. Uh, for that particular example, Molly, I'm still seeing my face on your screen, so maybe
Oh,
I stop share. That'd be great. That was distracting to see myself like that. Sorry.
you looked
So,
beautiful.
oh, thanks. For that particular example, that case study that we shared, that is actually two parishes that were coming together and had a very unique school situation. Obviously, Father Tom, your parish is two parishes coming together to work as one, and you have Liz managing that for you. But there's also situations in parishes where they might stand alone, but realize our resources are really, really limited. And so how do we leverage the skills or the talents of those in a neighboring parish to help us be more efficient, or how can we pull together some of our resources too? So as we talk through this, I want us kind of thinking about it from that angle as well, because I think that's also a really interesting opportunity for us as church, is to think creatively about how to work across parish boundaries as it relates to communications. And I think in a lot of these examples, it's not rocket science as much as it just requires time and intentionality around how to plan for what is our charism, and how are we going to introduce that into all of our messaging, or what exactly should we be saying about ourselves? Can we articulate who we are in a really simple way, and process, my goodness, like we have so much work to do as church to be more efficient in how we carry things through, so from beginning to end efficiently. So a lot of really good treasures that you shared with us there, Molly. Thank you. We wanted to just really open up the floor now for the rest of the conversation to either break open what we've discussed here a bit further, but really about any other topics. I know we have a couple of diocesan comms directors as well. So Maria, you're in Newark, and Kevin, hello, it's good to see you. You're in Denver. So we're kind of getting some different perspectives. Michelle had to go, but she might still be listening, but she's down in Austin. And then the balance from St. Louis. So just kind of want to open it up. And if there's anything regarding this particular topic, or just anything that's burning right now that on your hearts that you heard, or that you want to talk about and hear from any of the KPC team or from colleagues that are with us today, I'll just open it up.
Well, thank you for Molly. That was such a great case study to go through. So thank you so much for putting all that together. I love the logos, the diptych and the logos. That's really, really lovely. I guess my question would be, and I started talking, so Peppermint's like, "Oh, are we waking up now?" She's been asleep on my lap. I think my question would be has to do with about casting vision when you're talking to an audience that has been told something else very differently and specifically. So some of the things that we know we've run into in parishes is like, oh, but Father so-and-so said this, Father so-and-so said, don't talk to people in the next parish over. And so it's not just casting vision and shaping those hearts and minds, but it's in some cases going against what prior leadership and administrations have told them. So did you run into that at all, or do you have any strategies for saying, like, yes but no?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't run into it a whole lot. And I think part of that is because, I mean, Father Mike is just such an amazing man and pastor and father. And I think he can be really disarming in a lot of ways. So I think that he really welcomes this type of conversation, and so people can kind of process that with him in a very free way. Um, but I think for me, like when I did see it just a little bit in some of our workshops, it was like, this isn't like, us coming in and telling you what needs to look different. It's like, this is your parish. Like, this is yours. And so, like, how do you love that? And how do you get other people to love that? I think kind of putting the onus on them to say, like, yeah, Father so and so may have said this, but you've been here for 40 years, like, what do you think? And just giving them the opportunity to do that. I think they're like, oh, well, I'm not the priest. And you're like, but you are integral to the sacramental life of the church. So I thought that that was like a really beautiful moment, especially in some of our workshops. And I was grateful it happened the first one, because we all had a lot more fun, the second and third.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you.
I know one thing that I sort of see happening in parishes often is when we talk about the process piece and the workflow and the staffing and all of that, there's, I think, often a recognition that it's not where it should be, but also not necessarily a high level of receptivity to changing. And I don't want to put this just on you, Molly, but just just open it up for discussion. Is that something that others have experienced and maybe seen a way in which to address that? And even not just within staff, but looking at broader than that, looking at the parish volunteers. You have the person who's run the quilting group for 55 years and they don't want to change the way they send their emails or communicate, right? So just wondering if people have encountered that and how they've been able to address that, particularly as parish structures change and such.
Yeah, I can just share an anecdote that I think Father Tom would be all right with me sharing. We'll see. You can just throw up the side of that. But it had to do with this a group of people who primarily get their information from the parish through printed materials, so largely through the bulletin, flyers, those materials. And we work to try to kind of make the invitation that we have website, we have Flocknote, we have the calendar, we've got news information. And the response from this ladies group was more about, well, no, we're just going to do what we're just going to do. We reach our audience in the way we need to. And it was about these card parties. And so they were just calling the person they had always called to put it in the bulletin. And it was a ladies group that mostly did a lot of card parties, but had some other meetups as well. And so now that they've had a locate, and so for about a year, it was sort of Father Tom very wisely counseled me. He's like, do as much as you can with what you've got, but you don't have to like eat the whole elephant in one meal, So that was reaching their core audience, and in an effective way. Well, now they have moved, and they are actually meeting on the campus of the other parish, and they want to expand that to invite more people from the other parish. So canonically, these two parishes are separate. And I think from that communication standpoint, now they're at a growth moment of, we want more people to come, but reaching them through that traditional channel isn't as effective as it has been for the last however long. So I think we're getting to the point, and we're also partnering with organizations like Lindenwood Area Senior Ministry and some of these other community-based organizations to help support the older population with a variety of needs. But there's sort of a little understanding of, we have to be the one to make that invitation. It has to be a personal peer-to-peer invitation, and we have to do it in multiple channels. So as that little fissure, that little opportunity presents itself, we're going to work on like making sure, all of these events are on the parish website calendar. And we do have one website for both parishes with different pin drop locations. But that's just one of those ones of like, I was determined. I was so determined. I was like, no, we're going to have a full digital integration. And Father Tom was like, is that where you want to be spending your time, Liz? So I'm grateful for his counsel in that, of just sometimes you got to let it go. Yeah.
Well, and I think something that we certainly see here is, obviously Father Tom is a good leader in this, and Father Mike, Molly, in your example, also a strong leader. So helping guide those decisions and guide the conversations and helping shift the culture, there has to be intentionality around that from the top. And if there's not, then it makes it so much more difficult. I know my parish is enormous. We have 5,000 families. And our previous pastor just really didn't, he was just kind of fine with the status quo. He'd been there 20 years. Well, he just retired. Now we have a new guy, and he's ready to move. He's ready to make things different, and which is needed right now. So there's such a big impact there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also
sometimes I think of a strong leader is going to go tell your parishioners to back up what your staff is saying. But sometimes a strong leader is telling your staffers, like, you need to calm down and let that one go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
success builds upon success.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And So the harder group maybe is a group you don't need to reach out to at the moment, and you start building a case for the success of other groups and say, hey, look, these guys are growing, you're not growing. And I think also it's not unfair of us to point out that old ways are not necessarily working now. And for example, I like to tell the story about the St. Vincent de Paul Society at my last parish. They always had a Sunday where they got up and they gave a talk. And at the end of this talk, this gentleman who was probably in his 70s said, now all you young people have to step up because we old people are dying off. And any goodwill that he had gained to that point, or anybody that was thinking about volunteering, just decided not to. And so it's like pointing that out to people in the leadership of that group, saying, how would you respond if you were listening to this? I think is important. Where a lot of times in the past we would have just been quiet and chalked it up to being that was so and so or whatever. So pointing out, I don't want to say, bad communication habits that have developed over years, so we can replace them with the good ones, is important.
Very true.
And I think too, sorry, Katie.
Nope.
I think too, like that is why I have loved the process of and learning even more the process of KPC, like that it is it comes from the inside out, like it's coming from leaders, it's coming from them, and so like if it doesn't work, it's because either we didn't get to the core or, like they haven't been able to buy into what they believe, and I think that that's the hope, is that like, at least I hope when, I'm doing these workshops, it's kind of like I get to disappear a little bit and they get to think about the gift they've been given, so I think that if, hopefully if we can do that well enough, and obviously there's always, human, weaknesses and gifts and gaps, but that if we can do that well enough, that hopefully like it becomes a culture that they've created, that we haven't, that KPC hasn't created. It's a culture that's there, that we've uncovered, and that they're creating with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, that's so true. It's not just these external consultants came in and made these decisions for us, but rather helped guide a conversation that engaged the community in a synodal way. Yeah. Just to last few minutes here, we've lost Maria, and then we had Sandra, both from different dioceses. Sandra's from Milwaukee, and Maria from Newark. But Kevin, I'm gonna just prompt you here. You're in Denver. From a diocesan perspective, kind of what are you seeing, or what sort of experiences are you having as you try to work with your parishes as they face changes, and I guess what sort of success stories have you experienced that or best practices that you've learned within those parishes to help them be more effective in their communications?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that prompt. I think it's been said already, but strong leadership is essential, and I've seen it happen, and it's got to be the pastor, because where I can think of two parishes, one where the pastor is extremely overburdened, he's extremely charismatic, but also not a details guy, and doesn't, if you approach him about details, he kind of can get angry about it. Like, leave me alone, I don't have time, I'm too overburdened with all these other things. And as a result, his parish is really struggling, especially operationally, because his staff is confused, they don't have direction, and he's not, and especially when it's coming from the pastor, who's supposed to be, if there is a person you look to as Jesus, and this guy's a jerk because he can't lead effectively and his systems are all exploded, that does not just operational harm, but spiritual harm to the people that are at that parish. So when we're working with our parishes, making sure that that pastor is in a good place with a good leadership team around him is like step number one. And if we can't get that, then the communications is almost irrelevant, because it's just gonna be a mess. It's not gonna effectively communicate a vision because the pastor himself lacks that vision that a good leader needs to have. On the other side of that, and this is a different parish that's also going through a significant amount of change. They had the same pastor for 20 years. A new one was installed there with a very different, if I say like, I'm not trying to politicize it, but you could say like liberal Catholicism and conservative Catholicism. And let's just say that culture shift was a big one for the parish. And while the upheaval is certainly there, this pastor is committed. He's showing up to the dinners in the evenings. He's explaining why things like having the tabernacle off in a corner and it being recentered at considerable expense to rebuild their altar, why that's so important. And I've been involved in communications with some of his parishioners, and when they understand the reason that this is putting Christ back in the center of the Mass, and it's not removing the community aspect by having everyone looking forward instead of around the circle and all this stuff, suddenly they start to understand it. And that pastor wrote a really beautiful article called Recentering, and we've published it in our diocesan publication. And I'll keep this short, but he talks about how a lot of like the centering prayer, centering meditation that a lot of just non-Christian spirituality practices that I think a lot of folks in his parish would identify with. He talks about recentering on Christ instead of on ourselves. And I think that really helped people think, oh, this is why we're making these changes. And come around to what was up until that point a really hard thing for them to swallow, because they see a new pastor, they see this, we're doing all this construction, like everything's changing. It's been the same way with the same guy for 20 years. How could you do all this to us? And it's starting to bear fruit now that he's really investing in communicating to the people, not just the changes, but the why of those changes in a way that he understands that community, he understands his audience, and what kind of messaging is really going to make a difference to them. So, he can't just point to the catechism, and they don't even know that there is a catechism. So, he's got to put it in different terms. So, strong leadership, know your audience, and commit to that change. Because the pastor who moved the tabernacle, if he makes this big announcement, we're doing a capital campaign, and then 3 weeks later of angry emails says, oh, forget it, I'm just not going to do it. Well, you've lost every single battle from that one through the rest of your pastoring of that parish at that point, because you show that you're weak and you back down. So anyway, thanks. I know we have 2 minutes left. I could spend the rest of the day on this topic, so I don't want to do that, but it's been good to share with you. Thanks, Katie.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, and I think, to your point in terms of especially the strong leadership piece, I just wanted to underline what Father said, and he just had to take off, but that success breeds success. I think a lot of times, I know when I was at the diocesan level myself, it was, we need all the parishes to adopt this new idea. And it's sort of always the rule of thirds. You're going to have a third of the guys that are going to be most receptive to it. And so why not focus in on those that are willing and ready and able to embrace change or embrace the new reality, to show how it works and how it's successful. The other guys will follow eventually, or they won't, and then they'll fail. So, it's one of those realities for sure. Well, I want to be respectful of time, so I'm going to just stop us there, but just want to thank you all for joining today. And really appreciate this as an opportunity just to come together and dialogue with like-minded Catholic communicators. We've had a lot of people popping in and out, just kind of an open house style, which is great. We'll be having another one of these the first Friday of March, same time. And we'll be hearing about another parish example, similar topic. So it's good to see you all. Thank you for being with us, and we'll hopefully see you next month.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.